This is Jimi Hendrick, and this episode is called Singles in a Family Church on Christian Sphere. Okay, folks, here we go. I'm going to use some verses in the Bible in context here. Let me load up the Bible here so that we can look at this. We're in the book of Acts, chapter 6, verse 1. And in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected to the daily ministration. Now, you're probably wondering, this is, of course, where the presiding bishoprics are set up. And so, I'll be back with you in a little bit. I'm going to do some research and find out what general position in the church is involved with working with single adults. Okay, usually in the church, stake presidents, which is kind of like an archbishop for those of you who aren't members of the church, it's kind of like an archbishop. They usually assign someone that's like a high counselor to work with single adults. Be that as it may, sometimes I feel like so many of them fall through the cracks. And the church, no doubt, the church, I have no problem with them per se, with them having a family focus. But I will say this from my own perspective. I think far too many singles feel, inadequate. And why? Because they're single in a family church. I want you to write that down in some notes somewhere. Because this is something that needs to be addressed. And there's a variety of singles who are, there's those that were never married. There's those, such as myself, who are divorced. And we are a population, that could use a little help. Let's see who wrote this. Don L. Searle, he's associate editor of the Leon, I believe. I'm not sure. I think it was back in the days when it was Instant Magazine. He says, I gave a talk in church last week and reminded everybody that the gospel of Jesus Christ isn't 5 kids and a station wagon. Eileen recalls, sometimes in testimony meetings, I feel like saying, I don't have a husband who loves me, and I don't have any kids, and I still have a testimony. Let me tell you something. I'm not downing the church. They want to talk about, a family focus. Keep at it. Keep at it. But I think there needs to be just a little bit more focus on how a Latter-day Saint can carry on their discipleship in their personal life. The ones that are single. The words carry deep feeling. They express the sentiments of many members of the church who have never married and often feel left out because they are not one half of a married couple. Thoroughly committed to living the saving doctrines taught by the church, they still may not feel completely at home simply because so many programs and activities are oriented towards couples and their children. This is what I got to say, okay? To you bishops out there and you elders quorum presidencies, have you ever thought about asking your single congregants what would make a good social and make them feel welcome in the family church? Especially, the single adults that are in the populations where they're in the family wards. Have you ever thought about that? Because if you're a young single adult, it's relatively easy to go into a singles ward and maybe eventually find somebody. But if you're older, say you never married or you've been divorced, and maybe you have no kids, sometimes you're scratching your head wondering, how does this apply? How do I live the gospel just be me by myself? I'm not saying that it doesn't help us. I'm just saying we need a little bit more focus. Think about it. I want you to think about it. We're supposed to be sharing. We're supposed to be sharing Christian love to everyone, not just people who have families. I don't know how many times that I have sat in my home, sometimes on holidays, like say Labor Day, all by myself, sit there and crying and saying, other people are blessed with family. You can still be happy as a single person. But the problem is, sometimes in church, many singles are reminded of what they're not. And it can make going to church hard for some of us. I'm going to be honest with you. I think about this yesterday in general conference. I was hearing them, talking about, marriage and equal partnership and everything. And, I've been divorced. And I've sat there and I've had this regret. And I think to myself, well, maybe I'm not ever adequate for marriage. Maybe I'm just half of a person. And I eventually just tuned it out. And it shouldn't have to be that way. And I feel like Christianity often gives singles a lesser category. I see it's like second class. I'm just being honest with you. I'm not saying we necessarily have to set up singles groups. You know, there's some areas in the church where there's just not enough singles. But there's also this pressure to marry. You know, there's some members of the church that ask me, why aren't you dating yet? And the fact of the matter is I've become acutely aware of what's going on with that, you know. I think it's good for singles to associate with other single people. Happiness is not born in marriage alone, okay? Jesus Christ was single. Paul was single. Now, I know that there are some areas in the church where there aren't enough singles, or there's singles in one area, but not so much in other. We realize that they can't make every program for everybody in the church at once. And I realize that. But just because you're single doesn't mean that you can't get blessings from the church. Singles need to know that they're worthwhile, regardless of the marital status. You know? It's not just good just to marry somebody just because you're desperately lonely. I'm just going to say that. Because that's what happened to me. And you know what? It turned into a disaster. Okay? And neither should singles expect the church, though, to help them find a mate. I'll be honest with you. That has been something that has been an issue with me. Because, you know, so many people say, well, shouldn't you be dating? Shouldn't you try online dating? Just try online dating again. I'm just going to be as honest with you as I can. Online dating is cheesy. Because even in the church apps, you get people, how do I say it? The last time I was doing the online dating, one woman says, okay, I see that this is your occupation, but can you take care of me? Can you satisfy what I feel are my monetary needs? Let me tell you something. My last marriage was like that. And so I refuse to touch those dating opportunities with a 10-foot pole. Now, am I saying that singles can't eventually find a way to provide for themselves and maybe someday somebody else to marry? I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that Christians everywhere need to start making singles feel more welcome. They need to make them feel like they can be adequate disciples of Christ whether they marry or not. Okay, now I understand, it's good to desire to want to marry in the temple. I have that desire. And personally, I don't see myself dating outside the church unless, something major happened. And even then, I would try to see what I could do about helping them become a member of the church. Because, you see, here's the thing, though. Dating in this modern world, because of how complicated relationships have become, can, particularly online, can really bog a person down. Now, some people, it goes good, They connect with somebody and they click with somebody just like that. I know a former bishop of mine who met someone from Ukraine online. And they're married and they're happy. There's people that do that. But there's also singles. They're comfortable with being single. But they feel alone. They feel left out. I want you to think about that. This ain't something to sit there and fall around about. You have to know. You have to know this. This one thing. The gospel is meant for everyone. Not just for single people. Not just for married people. The gospel of Jesus Christ is meant for every single one of us. Regardless. Can you understand me with that? Now, if you're single and you feel the call to marry, yes, get married. But if you feel like that you're being pressured, don't. Find happiness in other ways. Now, with that, I hope you enjoy listening to Christian Pattern. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. Become a part of the Christian Pattern family. This is Jimi Hendrix saying, until next time, remember who you are, read your scriptures, and please, please, please preach the gospel. There's a hurting world out there.